Pam heard many sounds in her old house: the creaking floor, the swaying loose shutters and shingles. These sounds, though, were something different. Maybe a family of possums had moved into the crawl space. Regardless, Pam had other things to worry about. She was only recently the victim of an obsessional ex-lover who would stop at nothing to retaliate against her for breaking off their relationship. What Pam didn't realize, though, was that her stalker was living beneath her home and monitoring her every move. Next on In Focus, the crime and psychology of stalking. Hello and welcome to In Focus, a weekly public affairs program that examines issues and people who are making the news in and around Orange County. In Focus is produced by students enrolled in the television production workshop class here at Golden West College. In recent years, stalking has become one of the most dreaded crimes against women. According to a Justice Department study, 1 woman in 12 will be stalked during her lifetime. Joining me in the studio to talk about stalking is Dr. Michael Zona, MD, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist who pioneered the research into stalking and obsessional following. Welcome to In Focus.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for inviting me on to your show.
First thing, was that a true story?
It is a true story. This woman had a brief homosexual affair with another woman. She broke it off. She had second thoughts, wanted to go back with her ex-husband, as a matter of fact. And no matter where this woman went, she would be, her stalker, her ex-lover, would show up. And she's like, she must be tapping my phones. The police came out, checked her house. The phone company came out, checked her house, said, no, they're not, she's not tapping your phones. She must be finding out where you are, where, you know, through other means, a friend, whatnot. Well, it turns out that after this woman was eventually caught and prosecuted, she went under the house and found 2 command centers where the stalker was living under the house and listening to every phone call that was made and monitoring her every move.
What was the final outcome of this?
She was eventually, she had a restraining order against her. Her dad bailed her out. She went to the dad's home, stole his gun, went back to the victim, and either was planning a murder-suicide or suicide in front of the victim. And what happened was the victim Pam had seen what was going on, ran out of the house. The friends that were over the house ran out. It turned out to be an 11-hour SWAT standoff, at which time the suspect actually pointed the gun at a SWAT officer on a couple of occasions. She ended up doing 9 years in women's state prison.
Was Pam just a normal person, or was she a celebrity? Was she somebody of notoriety?
Pam was not a celebrity. She was just a regular person, just like you and I, who had a brief torrid love affair, and it broke off. And the person who became a stalker would not accept no for an answer and engaged in this pattern of behavior to terrorize her, to force her to go back out with her.
Then that just leads to my next question is, what is stalking? Is that an extreme case? And then is there a normal or a area of stalking?
If you're a victim, every case is extreme. No one wants to be the victim of a stalking campaign, but stalking is the intentional following, annoying, or harassing of a victim. It involves making a credible threat, and it also involves where the victim feels in fear of their own safety. So pursuit, per se, of a love interest doesn't cross the line to stalking. But when you couple that pursuit with obsessional following, a credible threat, and actually causing fearfulness in your victim and the person that you're pursuing, you've crossed the line, you're now a stalker.
Okay, let's say that I'm here at school, and all of a sudden I notice that somebody is just constantly lurking around. Every time I look around, they're kind of lurking in the parking lot or in the cafeteria or in the back of a classroom. Is that stalking?
No, that's not stalking, because that could be a coincidence. You don't know what that person's, they could be going out on a nightly basis looking for their cat that's been missing for a week.
If it's the same person?
The same person who lost the same cat? Sure.
What about if you have this feeling, people always have the feeling they're being watched, and they know it's this, the same, the same person, at different locations, at the grocery store, at the gym.
Bingo. Right, and that would betray a greater sense of research. That would show that the person is in fact researching their victim. They are stalking. If you just came to this campus and happened to see the same person for a week in a row, it could be a coincidence. Could be the person has taken up an office next to you. But if you find yourself at the gym, you look over and that person happens to be looking at you, then you're shopping and the person's going down the other aisle, that should rightly send a chill up your spine.
What about the constant phone call? The same person, you call and hang up, calling at odd hours. Is that stalking?
That is annoying. That is a crime, actually, in California. But if you couple that with a credible threat, it will become stalking. It will become the felony and the crime of stalking.
You say credible threat. What constitutes a credible threat?
Credible threat would be something like, ultimately the answer is a jury decides whether or not that threat is credible. But if I say to you, give me an A, or your car will be destroyed. That is a conditional threat. But if I say to you, you better go out with me or your life will be miserable, that would be considered a credible threat. Now, if you couple that with behaviors, an aggressive campaign of following, harassing, telephone calls, internet stalking, showing up at places where you ordinarily go, like the gym or shopping or what have you, then that would be a crime of stalking, and that would be putting a behavior with the obsession and the threat. You've got all of the elements for the crime of stalking.
What about the one of the need to be rescued? In other words, you're in your car and all of a sudden, for no unexplained reason, you have a flat tire or your car the belt's broken, and all of a sudden now this person just shows up out of the blue. Is that a stalker? Is that stalking?
That's highly suspicious, and that would either be stalking, or there's a lot of people who engage in sex crimes who do that kind of behavior. If you're driving down the highway and somebody bumps into your car behind you, wants you to pull over, and a lot of those things are planned, and they're actually planned rapes and assaults. Can
people be stalked via the internet and via text?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Give an example.
Well, it's just like receiving multiple phone calls. Any medium is going to eventually become annoying. If every time you open your inbox and you have 65 emails, that's the same thing as listening to your messages and having 65 messages laid on your answering machine. So that would be annoying, harassing telephone calls or annoying, harassing emails.
It's amazing. How would someone know if they're being stalked? In other words, are there signs? Are there?
Well, there are signs. I think what you have to really look for is whether this person is willing to transgress your own sense of boundaries. And we all have a sense of boundaries, and you can say no to somebody or yes to somebody, and you have a certain relationships with other people. But if somebody starts moving into your comfort zone and moving into the boundaries, and they start saying things like, "Oh, I didn't know you like to bench press at the gym," and you're like, "Bench press? Why is this person watching me at the gym?" That's a pretty good sign that you're being stalked. Or they say, "Geez, you worked late last night." Well, what does that mean? That means that they were either following you or they were staking out by your house, waiting for you to come home. Those are signs that you're being stalked, and those are anything that's going to give you the creeps is your own gut, your own intuition. If somebody starts moving into your comfort zone and you don't like where they're going with that, then that's a good indication you're being stalked.
Is there a difference between someone who is stalking an average, ordinary Joe and a celebrity? We heard about some of the celebrity stalking that's occurred.
There's a big difference. Back in 1991, Rebecca Schaefer was murdered by a fellow by the name of Robert Bardot, and he was a celebrity stalker. About that same time, I was doing research in a different kind of stalker, somebody who suffers from erotomania. I started working with the Los Angeles Police Department and started looking at all of these cases, and it turns out that the celebrity stalker is actually the uncommon situation. It's just the one that hits the press all the time. In reality, the most common type is the boy next door, girl next door, love gone sour.
Is there any, I don't know if this is a political sensitive question, but are men more prone to be stalkers than women?
Oh, absolutely. Men are much more prone to be stalkers. Probably 80 to 90% of the stalking cases are men on women. And women are universally the victims of stalker crimes. When a man is the victim of a stalker crime, it usually is an acquaintance or somebody he's never met before. If the woman is a victim of a stalker crime, by and large, it's somebody she's known or had a relationship with in the past.
Is there something that people do, or is it subconsciously that could, some people would make them a greater possibility of being a victim of a stalker? Or some, better question, are some people more prone to be stalked than others?
It's a crapshoot, but a lot of what's very common is the female who presents the girl next door, the very approachable individual, newscaster on a local television set. That's the type of person who's very prone. And then after that, what they do or say, all bets are off. If they happen to wear a purple dress that evening, you'll see a letter to the talent saying, I noticed you wore the purple dress. You know that's my favorite color. And therefore, that means I'm supposed to come talk to you. I will be in the area of the studio trying to make contact with you next week. And so you really don't know. All bets are off with a lot of people with mental disorders as to when they're going to approach or do something.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but when InFocus returns, Dr. Zona will talk about the different types of stalkers. We're talking tonight with Dr. Michael Zona, MD, board certified forensic psychiatrist and expert in the field of stalking behaviors. Are there different types of stalkers, or is it one size fits all?
Warren, 15 years ago, when people talked about stalking, they talked about Rebecca Schaefer being stalked, other stars, Teresa Saldana, Jodie Foster, and so on. And that's what people used to think stalkers were. After Rebecca Schaefer was killed, the powers that be in Los Angeles understood that there needed to be, LA being the entertainment capital of the world, some sort of task force created to study stalkers and to try to understand the crime of stalking. In Los Angeles, the first police anti-stalking unit was formed in the country, and that was called the Threat Management Unit. At that time, I got involved with them, and I became a reserve officer, mainly so that I could study their database. And what we found is there are, in fact, 3 kinds of profiles of stalkers. And no longer can we now talk about stalkers in terms of one big group. We have to say, no, you know what? Let's understand the dynamic between the different types of stalker profiles.
And what are each? Can you go through each of those different types of profiles?
Sure. Well, the first kind is called erotomania, and that's very rare, and that is a delusional disorder. In the 1600s, that was called old maid's insanity, this disorder. And why? Well, because the majority of people who have this disorder are women. And what they have is the delusion or the false belief that somebody famous loves them. And it used to be royalty. Nowadays, it's entertainment, sports celebrities, and at times politicians. So this person has a delusion that somebody famous loves them. They are quite enamorous to them, but oftentimes they're very shy. They don't usually make contact. They usually write oodles of letters and send gifts and whatnot, but they typically don't approach the object of their desire. For them, it's good enough that their self-esteem is bolstered by this famous person, by knowing delusionally that this famous person loves them. So the people who have erotomania write a lot of letters, do a lot of things like that, but don't often engage in contact behavior.
And you say it's primarily female?
Primarily female, 80% female in these situations. And they don't know the person. They've never met them. They know them only through the television.
The second type is?
Second type is a disorder called love obsessional. And with love obsessional, these individuals, like the people with erotomania, know the individual through the news media. They know it could be a sports celebrity, a famous game show host, the mayor of Los Angeles, what have you. And they know that person only through the media. They don't have a prior relationship. But they have the delusion, or they have a mental disorder, usually bipolar or schizophrenia, where they have some sort of delusion that they have a connection with that person. And not all the time is it amorous. Sometimes it's a negative thing, like you're putting voices in my head, and I have to go after you because you're infecting me with a disease or so on. So they have this psychiatric disorder that's coupled with their victim, their star, if you will, and they engage in a campaign of stalking to try to make that person quit. Or if it is amorous, then they're trying to engage in a campaign like, oh, I love Madonna, and I don't care if she knows about me, but I'm guarantee you this, she's gonna know about me. So they do this kind of thing. Now these folks, we had one case where this fellow would send 7 to 20 letters a week. And he was supposed to be on his lithium. He had bipolar disorder. And when he took his lithium, his frequency of letters went down. And then when he went off his lithium, his frequency of letters, I could almost tell you the level of lithium, his therapeutic level of lithium, based on how frequently the letter writing campaign was. So that's the love obsession. They have a mental disorder. They don't know their victim.
And the third type is?
And the third type is the simple obsessional. That's the boy next door. That's the ex-lover. And it's a love gone sour.
Is that the most common?
That is, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it's the most dangerous, it's the most common, it's the most intense.
Now, we talked about the 3 types of stalkers. Is there one of your expertise is a profiling a stalker. Is there a standard profile of a stalker?
A lot of agencies and departments use the profiles that I created and published originally back in 1993, I think it was. And some people have done different spin-offs and different variations of the actual profiles. But the profiles are unique in that, unlike, let's say, a mass murderer or a serial murder, these profiles focus on the relationship, the perceived relationship of the victim and the suspect intertwined. So it's a different dynamic. And for me, that's the most important component of stalking profiles, because once you understand the relationship, you can understand how to make an intervention.
And what is it? Before you did intervention, when I go to on the simple obsession, the third one you talked about. Now, would dating a stalker? In other words, a woman is watching this. She says, "He's saying these things. I think I'm dating a stalker," because some of these things are just. What should someone do if or how would someone know if they're dating a stalker?
There are some telltale signs. I believe that these stalkers, a lot of them, again, we're not talking necessarily about the erotomania or love obsessional, because those are the star type things, the celebrity type stalkers. But the simple obsessionals, there are people who are interpersonally exploitive. I have a theory, like a 50-second rule, where somebody could go into a bar and find an individual that they could exploit within 50 seconds. These sociopathic individuals, these narcissistic people are so good and so attuned at finding weakness in people. But when you find somebody who's overly controlling, possessive, researching, saying things like, who is that guy you were talking to at work? Wait a minute. You don't own me, number one. And number two, we've only dated twice. It's none of your business who that guy was. And thirdly, what the hell were you doing in my workplace? You don't even work here. Were you watching me, with binoculars or something? So all those sorts of indications of somebody who's overly possessive, feeling as if they own the other individual, they're trying to control their behavior, those, grab a parachute and jump as quickly as you can.
Would checking someone's cell phone, their phone calls, their text messages, would that fall in that? Unless
you're married, that's not appropriate behavior.
So now you mentioned earlier, before you went to that, about intervention. So then someone thinks they're with the simple obsessional. What is the intervention? How would the intervention happen with that?
Well, in that situation, first of all, what the woman has to do is tell the person, no, get out of my life. This is not going to happen. But the simple obsessional types where the love gone sour, those individuals by and large are not psychotic. They usually have personality disorders or substance abuse disorders. They understand real from unreal. They need to understand that they're not allowed to do this behavior, and if they do, there's going to be consequences. So the intervention is reality-based.
Now, who leads the intervention? In other words, I know in the third part you're going to be talking about what to do and that, but who leads that? Is that who leads that intervention? Or
the woman or the person being stalked is the person who has to say no. And too often in our society, a woman is used to being nice to the guy, letting him down easily and so on. You can't do that with a possessive, over-controlling individual. You have to say, no, this is not going to be the relationship. And I'll tell you another thing. If you relent, after 35 phone calls, you relent and you say, okay, I'll meet you for a cup of coffee. What have you done? Warren, you've just taught that stalker that the price for a cup of coffee is 35 phone calls. So you've done a positive reinforcement for that negative behavior. What you have to do is you have to say no, and then you have to cease all contact.
How often does stalking end in violence or death?
Well, it's quite common. Right now, there's approximately 1 million incidences per year of stalker or intimate violence against each other in the country, according to the latest statistics. And in terms of death, I believe it's approximately 20 per week, something along those lines, of death.
Wow. When we turn, Dr. Jones is going to talk about what you should do if you find yourself a victim of a stalker.
Harvey, what's for breakfast?
Guten Tag!
Johannes, Ron!
I
I bring you arts-enriched Raisinblams, fortified with increased test scores and creative problem-solving skills.
It's good!
And good for you.
Bobby? Susie?
Don't worry, that's just the power of the arts!
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit americansforthearts.org.
Emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have
Right.
beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah, right?
We're talking here on InFocus with Dr. Michael Zona, forensic psychiatrist and expert on stalking behaviors. In the time we have remaining, what can be done if you think you're being stalked? We've gone through all these terrible scenarios, different profiles, different types. Someone watching this says, my God, I'm being stalked. What next? Are there steps? What should they do?
Well, there are steps, and even knowing what the steps are doesn't guarantee you total safety, but it can reduce some of your risks.
So, first thing.
First thing, we already talked about it. Say no. Say no definitively, and after you say no, cease contact. It's the folks that say no, but then start getting a little, well, okay, I'll do one more thing, or I'll do. Those are the ones who only provoke the stalker to do more things. You have to decide you don't want to be in the relationship. You say no, and then you cease all contact.
And if they keep contacting you, what
Then
next?
I think you have to start considering yourself the victim of a stalker campaign.
At what point do we call the police?
Well, even before you call the police, start documenting everything. Get a log, document, document, document. It's not hard now to, what a lot of people say will be change your phone. If the person's calling, change your telephone number. Well, there are ways for people to find new telephone numbers. So my recommendation is not to change your phone, but get a second telephone number. And the first telephone number, you put a recording on it, and you just document and tape record all of the different calls they're making, because you're going to need that for evidence when you go to the police and you start talking about that you're the victim of a stalking campaign. You don't have to go to the police right away, but you do have to start documenting things right away. You do have to change your phone, and let me underscore once again, you have to cease all contact.
What about personal safety?
There are ways to help with personal safety. You definitely want to look over your shoulder. You want to have if you get out at a shopping mall, for example, you want to make sure that that person's not there near your car when you're getting out. You want to make sure that you're in a secure parking situation, maybe get escorted to your car when you leave work. That's the other thing. You really need to tell your workplace if you're being stalked, because a lot of times a stalker, you might change your apartment, you might change your places of your telephone numbers and what have you, but the stalker still knows where you work. So they could go in and say, oh yeah, I'm Lisa's boyfriend. I'm going to deliver these flowers. Oh, that's sweet of you. And then they get through reception, and then they're lying in wait in the cubicle. So
What about a restraining order?
Restraining orders, by and large, as a piece of paper, won't protect you. But even before you get the restraining order, if you're getting to that point, I think you need to go ahead and drop a dime. I was going to say that's old-fashioned, but you need to call the local police and introduce yourself. Tell them what's involved. Tell them that you think you're a victim of a stalker. You want to bring your documentation that you've been doing, and you want to explain, give the police officer your numbers and so on and so forth, so that they can help you develop the paperwork necessary for a restraining order.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time. If someone's watching and they think they're with a stalker, they think they're being stalked, how could they contact you, get more information about stalking?
They could email me at mzona@americansforthearts.org. at socal.rr.com or go to my website.
Your website is?
Which is michaelzonamd.com.
Okay, and they just put a graphic up for that, so
Okay.
everything else.
Thank you, Warren.
We're out of time. Stalking is a disturbing and menacing crime. I hope today's program has given you information to identify stalkers and some tips on how to protect yourself from being stalked. I would like to thank Dr. Zoner again for joining me today on In Focus, and I'd like to thank you for watching.